The CSEC May-June 2025 economics paper. Let's get into it, guys. Question number 1. Define each of the following terms. Production. Production is the process of converting factors of production into goods and services that consumers desire to consume. 2 marks. Productivity. Productivity is a measure of output per unit of input. For example, labor productivity refers to the production per unit of labor input. Economics. Economics is a scientific study of how man uses scarce resources to produce goods and services to satisfy his wants, or you could say desire. Part B discusses how each of the following advantages of specialization helps the tourism sector. Increase output. Specialization enables individuals, firms, or regions to focus or concentrate on the task or services in which they have the most expertise or efficiency. In the tourism sector, this leads to increased output because tour operators, hotel staff, transport providers, and artisans can each focus on the area of expertise. For example, when a hotel focuses solely on hospitality services, while a tour company specializes in organizing excursions, both can serve more tourists efficiently. As a result, the greater variety and availability of services enhance the overall tourist experience, which in turn boosts the sector's productivity and its contribution to national income. Next part, we have better quality goods and services produced. Specialization improves the quality of goods and services because workers and firms become more skilled and efficient at their specific task. In the tourism industry, this results in a higher standard of customer service, more professional tour experiences, and superior accommodation. For instance, trained chefs in resort restaurants, skilled guides in ecotourism, and experienced hotel with hospitality staff all contribute to a more enjoyable and safe or satisfying, I should say. Well, it's safe also. Satisfying tourist experience. Higher quality services attract repeat visitors and positive reviews, enhancing the country's reputation as a tourist destination. Right, that was just something extra. Part C wants us to illustrate the average cost curve for a firm. Sorry, figure 1. Figure 1. Yes, figure 1 illustrates the average cost curve for a firm. Study the figure and answer the questions that follow. So on our y-axis, guys, we have the average cost per unit, and on the x-axis, we have our quantity. This is the average cost curve right here, right? So now they want us to explain how each of the following affects average costs. Now, economies of scale. In the diagram, as output increases from Q1 to Q3, right? Output increase from Q1 to Q3, the average cost per unit falls. The average cost per unit falls, right? From AC1 to AC3. The downward slope of the average cost curve over this range indicates that the firm is benefiting from economies of scale, resulting in a lower AC, average cost curve, right? The curve will get lower. It's a lower average cost. And for those of you guys who don't know what is economies of scale refers to the cost advantages that a firm experiences as its level of production increase. Very basic. However, for these economies of scale, in the diagram, as output increases beyond Q3, to Q4, so it's beyond this point here as well. It's beyond Q3 to Q4, so it's not this range, it's beyond that, as shown by the arrow. The unit cost rises from AC3 to AC2, signaling that the firm is now encountering diseconomies of scale. Additionally, the upward sloping segment of the AC curve following its minimum point clearly illustrates this term right here. So as you can see by the arrow, it's signaling that the firm is experiencing diseconomies of scale. And diseconomies of scale occurs when a firm grows too large and experiences inefficiencies such as poor communication, lack of coordination, or worker demotivation. These inefficiencies drive up the average costs. Number 2, define each of the following terms and give an example of each. Goods. Goods are tangible items that people create to satisfy human wants and needs. They can be touched and physically possessed. Example of a good will be a Crick's cheese and spinach crackers, which is made obviously by Bermuda's Biscuit Company, which you all know in the Caribbean, right? We like to put our Crick's in our tea to eat. Services. Services are intangible activities performed to fulfill human wants and needs. They cannot be physically touched or possessed. An example of a service would be a facial or manicure provided by the spa, right? At the spa. It's a service. Part B, Lomas Motors has been making luxury cars for the past 50 years. Although it has become profitable, the business incurred significant expenses, especially during its early years of operation. Discuss how Lomas Motors could have incurred the following costs. Fixed costs. Fixed costs are payments of factors of production that remain constant, regardless of the level of output in the short run. Therefore, Lomas Motors would have to pay for the factory building, machinery, and insurance, regardless of whether the company produces any cars. These are long-term commitments that remain constant throughout the production process. Variable costs. Variable costs are payments of factors of production and vary according to the level of outputs. As Lomas Motors produces more cars, these costs rise. If production falls, they decrease. Therefore, Lomas Motors incur variable costs such as raw materials like steel, tires, and paints, and wages for factory workers. If they increase car production, more materials and labor will be needed. As a result, these costs will rise. Part C, with the aid of a demand-supply graph, explain the relationship between supply, I should say surplus, between surplus and equilibrium price. Now on my diagram, I have a label. The first thing you should do is to label the X and Y axis. On my Y axis, guys, I have my price. I have P1, PE. On my X axis, I have quantity demanded and supplied. We can clearly see that the demand curve is shown by the yellow line and the supply curve is shown by the blue line. Where the demand and supply reach is called a term the equilibrium point, and it is shown right here by this letter EQ. We have here a surplus, right, which is shown by the distance between M and K. Okay, awesome. We have an equilibrium price and an equilibrium quantity. That is why it is called P sub E or Q sub E, or you can say PE or QE, right? We just name it. When a market is in this equilibrium, such as when P1 is set above the equilibrium price, PE, a surplus will occur, as shown by the distance between M and K. This surplus puts downward pressure on the price. P1. Eventually, leading the market back to equilibrium since rational consumers will not purchase more of a good at higher prices according to the law of demand. Very simple, guys. So once you draw your diagram, you will get your mark, right? The question is 6 marks. They are marking it for your description as well as the diagram you'll be drawing for them. So just make sure you have these things drawn out and explained. Number 3, define each of the following terms. Market structure. A market structure refers to the features that determine the behavior and performance of firms in an industry. Public goods. Public goods are goods that everyone in society can use or benefit from. They have 2 characteristics: non-excludability and non-exhaustibility. Market failure. Market failure occurs when the market fails to allocate resources efficiently to satisfy society's requirements or needs and wants. Part B wants us to discuss 2 reasons why an electric company might become a monopoly. Reason 1. Governments often pass laws or grant license to allow only one firm to provide essential utilities such as electricity. These laws and licenses prevent other firms from entering the industry, thereby creating a monopoly. For example, across many Caribbean islands, the electricity supply is handled by a single state-owned company due to government regulations. Reason 2. Producing and distributing electricity requires a substantial investment in infrastructure. And we are talking here about the power plants and transmission lines. This high cost acts as a barrier to entry, making it difficult for new firms to enter and compete. As a result, one company ends up dominating the markets or industry. Part C, carefully examine the graph of a monopoly in figure 2 below. State the correct label for each of the following. So AA is the demand or average revenue curve. BB is the marginal cost curve. CC is the average total cost or average cost curve. Calculate the monopoly's profit. So profit maximization is reached at the point where MR is equal to MC, right? All firms will want to produce where MR is equal to MC. That is the profit maximizing unit right there, or outputs. Therefore, the monopoly will produce at 4 units. That is where the monopoly will be producing its unit at 4 units at a price of $8 when we connect the 4 units to the AR curve. That is where we get the price that will be set in the market at that unit right here, guys. We're going to connect the 4 units to the AR or demand curve. Now the cost of 1 unit will be $5, right? After we connect the same 4 units, right? Because remember, profit maximizing, right? There's a profit maximizing quantity right here, 4 units. After we move this up to touch or reach the AC curve, and we go across to get the corresponding price, it will be $5. That is how we get $5 here. Therefore, the profit on 1 unit will be $8 minus $5, which is 3. As a result, the economic profit, because the monopoly essentially is making supernormal economic profit here, right? That is a deadweight loss. Deadweight loss is occurring. The welfare of society is not maximized. So the monopoly will make a profit or economic profit, which will be the same $3 times the 4. which gives us what? $12. Number 4A. State three characteristics of Caribbean economies. True characteristics of Caribbean economies are monocrop economies, small population and market size, and few natural resources. Part 2 wants us to identify 3 challenges commonly faced by Caribbean economies. 3 challenges commonly faced by Caribbean economies are low per capita gross national product, GNP, a large pool of unskilled labor, and limited access to technology. Part B wants us to discuss how the transactionary motive will impact money demand when workers receive bonuses before Christmas. The transactional motive refers to the need to hold money for day-to-day or daily expenses, such as food, transportation, and bills. Additionally, when workers receive bonuses before Christmas, the amount of funds at their disposal increases. As a result, the demand for money rises, right? Because they prefer to keep more cash on hand to cover the extra spending typical of the Christmas season. This surge in demand is a short-term and seasonal thing, right? As people tend to make purchases during that period. Discuss how speculative motive will impact money demand if experts predict that there will be a stock market crash. The speculative motive is a desire to hold cash at the bank to capitalize on future investment opportunities. If experts predict a market crash, investors expect that stocks and bond prices are likely to drop. As a result, investors reduce their investments in these assets and hold liquid funds, right? Cash instead. Therefore, the demand for money increases due to fear of losses. Part C, Table 1 below shows the economic activities of country X. Use the information in the table to answer the questions that follow. So Table 1, country X, expenditure and net incomes are right here, and the value is in millions. Now they want us to calculate the gross national product for country X. Now, when we are talking about the national product of the country, the factors of production should come to mind, right? And these factors of production should be domestically owned, right? Or locally owned, right? Or belong to that particular country. So in order to calculate GNP, it will be GDP, right? GDP plus the net property income from abroad, right? Not minus, it should be plus. Should be plus, not minus, guys. Always keep that in mind. Always keep that in mind. It is plus. Why we want to add the net property income from abroad? Because there may be people, citizens of a particular country that may be working in another country and is sending money back home. So we need to incorporate that as well. Or we may have a business. A country may have a popular company that we know and it's well respected that probably has operations in other countries. So we need to consider that as well too, right? It is not fair that, hey, other countries are seeing their GDP figures increase while we don't consider that, hey, our company, our people are helping that country grow GDP, but why not consider their work, their service, their expenditure, or their investments in our calculation as well too? So in a sense, GNP is trying to even out the playing field, right? So GNP is calculated as 100,000, and that is in millions, guys, right? For consumption plus 50,000 for investment plus the 20,000 for government spending plus the net exports, right? We have a net export because exports are greater than imports right there. So 30,000 minus 5,000 plus the net property income from abroad, which would be the 7,000 minus the 2,000, right? Right, and now we have this figure. GNP is equal to the 200,000. Now that's in millions. Okay, awesome. Now, Joanne is a resident of country X who works in country B. Using table 1, identify the category in which his income should be placed. Now, this table right here is a country X. Now, if he is a resident, a citizen of country X, then he belongs to country X. Country X, his factors, all of his service and productivity belongs to the country he's a resident of. Okay? So his income will be placed in the net income receipts of domestic residents from overseas, right? Because he's not in country X. However, he belongs to country X. So that will be the category he will fall under, right here. Now state the impact of Joanne's income on the GNP and GDP of country B. Impact on GNP of country B. The GNP of country B will decrease because he's not a citizen, right? His factor, which is his labor, is not part of country B. It's part of country X. Impact of GDP of country B. Obviously, the GDP of country B will increase since he provides his labor service there, right? Very, very simple to understand. Number 5, A. List 3 components of the balance of payments. The 3 components of the balance of payments are the current account, the capital account, and the official reserves account. Part B, identify the concepts that relate to the following definitions. The ratio between import and export price indices is called terms of trade. When the payments into and out of an economy do not balance, we call it a balance of payments deficit or surplus. Could be either or. A tax imposed by one country on the goods and services imported from another country or imported from other countries is called a tariff, right? That big, beautiful word, tariff, according to Donald Trump. Part C, describe 4 ways in which the Caribbean could benefit from preferential agreements with the European Union, the EU. Caribbean exports become more competitive because the EU applies lower tariffs on their goods. As a result, Caribbean products become more affordable in the EU market, leading to higher sales and increased export revenue. Benefit 2, preferential agreements help to build and create employment in Caribbean industries. Importantly, increased demand for Caribbean exports ensure that workers stay employed in sectors such as agriculture and manufacturing. Benefit 3, preferential agreements strengthen trade ties and international relations between the Caribbean and the EU. Therefore, such negotiations encourage long-term partnerships and cooperation in trade and development. And benefit 4, preferential agreements allow the EU to support economic growth and development in developing Caribbean nations. This assistance aims to help poorer nations by making their products price competitive and compensating for historical disadvantages. Right. Part D. Figure 3 shows a graph of the market for US dollars in a country with a floating exchange rate regime. On the y-axis, we have price of US dollar in euros, And on the x-axis, they have quantity of US dollars. Using the information from figure 3, explain whether the US dollar has appreciated or depreciated. And a currency can only appreciate, I'm just putting that fact out there, that a currency can only appreciate under a floating or flexible exchange rate regime, right? However, under a fixed exchange rate regime, a currency can either revalue or devalue, right? Get these terms in your vocabulary. It's very, very important to note the difference. Okay, so let's get into it. Since the demand curve shifted from D1 to D2, as shown by the arrow, guys, it shows an increase in demand for US dollars. As a result, the price of the US dollar in euros will increase as the market reaches a new equilibrium price and quantity. Therefore, the US dollar has appreciated relative to the euro. As shown, EQ1 to EQ2, a new equilibrium has been created because more demand was for the US dollar. Okay, great. Part 2, I want us to briefly explain one factor that may have caused a shift in the demand for US dollar from D1 to D2. If people in the Eurozone want to buy more goods and services from the US, they will need more US dollars to pay for those products. This higher demand for US exports increases the demand curve to the right from D1 to D2. So export, guys, that is one of the most common ways a currency can appreciate on a floating exchange rate, in that the citizens of the other foreign countries demanding more products from your country. And if they are demanding more products, then you need to purchase goods in your currency. Therefore, there's a demand for your currency relative to the other one, thus causing the appreciation. Very, very easy to understand. And that is it for today, guys. See y'all next time. Don't forget, you got this.